Hello, and welcome to My Career in Data, a podcast where we discuss with industry leaders and experts how they have built their careers. I'm your host, Shannon Kemp, and today we're talking to Michel Morgan from Universal P&C.
With a robust catalog of courses offered on demand and industry-leading live online sessions throughout the year, the DATAVERSITY Training Center is your launchpad for career success. Browse the complete catalog at training.dataversity.net and use code DVTalks for 20% off your purchase.
Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp, and I'm the Chief Digital Officer at DATAVERSITY, and this is My Career in Data, a DATAVERSITY Talks podcast dedicated to learning from those who have careers in data management, to understand how they got there, and to talk with people who help make those careers a little bit easier. To keep up to date in the latest in data management education, go to dataversity.net/subscribe. Today, we are joined by Michel Morgan, General Counsel of Operations at Universal P&C. And normally, this is where a podcast host would read a short bio of the guest. But in this podcast, your bio is what we're here to talk about. Michel, hello and welcome.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me, Shannon.
I'm so excited to hear about your journey. I'm so grateful that you're here. So tell me, you're the General Counsel of Operations at Universal P&C. So first tell me, what type of business is Universal P&C?
Okay, so Universal P&C really is acronym for property and casualty. So Universal Property and Casualty is a property and casualty insurance business. It writes policies in about 19 states throughout the United States right now.
Interesting. And as the General Counsel of Operations, what is it that you do for them?
So I am one of Universal's general counsels that works on overseeing the legal department operations for the company. So most of the legal department operational needs for Universal is based on lawsuits that arise out of the state of Florida. Not only Florida, obviously the company writes in other states, but most of the operational needs of the legal department is consumed by lawsuits that arise out of the state of Florida, because for several years there was a statutory scheme in place in Florida that created an automatic right to attorney fees for lawyers representing insureds in lawsuits that they bring on behalf of these insureds against a property insurance carrier. So in managing and overseeing the efficiency of the legal department operations, one of my primary duties has been to identify and assess the staffing needs for the various groups within the department and liaise with our outside vendors that provide the tools and resources that are needed to facilitate the work that we do to manage the lawsuits that we handle for the company. And then parallel to that, I also work on assessing and forecasting risk exposure to the company based on the various policies that we write that these lawsuits are typically brought under.
Oh, very interesting. So that kind of segues into that. My next question, and how you work with data in your job. It sounds like you work with a lot of data.
Absolutely. I work with a lot of data in my position, particularly as it relates to these lawsuits that I was just discussing. Working with data is basically a staple of the job. From the staffing perspective that I mentioned earlier, I'm in constant data collection and analysis mode on how the many lawsuits that we're handling and expect to handle in the future, how much time it takes to do all the tasks that are required to handle those lawsuits, and therefore how much and what type of staff that we need to complete those tasks. Or alternatively, I might be looking at what technology solutions exist that we can put in place through the vendors that we work with to assist with the efficiency of completing all the work that we need to do on the lawsuits that we handle for the company. So this not only requires an analysis of the actual raw data but in-depth knowledge of the laws and the court rules of procedure that apply to the tasks that we're doing on these cases that we're handling. And then from a forecasting and risk assessment perspective, I'm also always in data collection and analysis mode because I have to look at data points like litigation trends and the outcomes of cases that we resolve versus the ones that we take to trial, and predicted exposure and lawsuits that we have coming down in the pipeline based on the specific insurance policies that they're written under and whether and what type of attorney fees we might be exposed to on them. So constantly, definitely working with a lot of data across all tasks that I do for the department.
It's very interesting. So do you also have to get into the weeds of the governance of the data? Like, because I know for legally, so in dealing with lawsuits, you have to retain the data for X number of years, right?
Yes, we do have to retain the data for a certain number of years as it relates to the data that's under the claim files that become evidence in a lot of these lawsuits that we're handling. So from that perspective, yes, we have data retention, governance principles and guidelines that we have to work with pursuant to, the laws in the state.
Yeah. Wow, a lot of data. So let's back it up. So very, very interesting. So tell me, Michelle, when you were very young, say, 6 years old, is this what you wanted to be when you grew up? Did you say, I'm going to grow up to be a general counsel of operations, or what's the goal?
Not so specifically. I always wanted to be a lawyer growing up. My dad is a lawyer as well, so I grew up admiring the writing and the analysis aspect of practicing law. So I always wanted to be a lawyer representing corporations, so that part was pretty defined. But in my first year of starting law school, I realized that it would be very important for me to understand how companies use data to make intelligent decisions about how they manage their business and their operations. So in my first year of law school, that's when I decided to also apply to business school and get my MBA specializing in business intelligence and analytics.
Oh, very interesting. So tell me about school and then what you did major, what all your majors are and what you achieved there.
Yeah, so my first undergrad was in political science. That was, traveling along the lines of doing the typical type of undergraduate degree that you do before you want to go to law school, because I always knew I wanted to go to law school. And then after I finished my bachelor's in political science, I decided to work for a little bit. And I started pursuing a second undergrad when I started working. So, my organization I worked with had a, work study thing where they would pay for your, college degree. So I pursued a parallel undergrad in legal studies at the University of Maryland. My first undergrad was from Florida Atlantic University. So I pursued the legal studies undergrad as a segue to start law school after working for about 2 or so years. And then that's when at the conclusion of that second undergrad, I applied to and got into Nova Southeastern University Law School in Fort Lauderdale. So it was during my first year there that I also dual enrolled into the MBA program at Nova University. But early enough in my first year, I realized how difficult it was to do that first year of law school and try to do another degree at the same time. So I started the MBA classes and then put those on pause until after I graduated law school. And then I picked it up again once I was settled into my second job out of law school. I picked up the remaining classes to complete the MBA. So, by that time, I was definitely fully convinced that I wanted to continue to work in the legal corporate space, and I was convinced that it was important for me to complete this MBA and focus particularly on business intelligence and analytics, because I realized the volume of data that all these corporations are working with, and I saw where I could be an asset by really understanding how to collect and analyze data to help those boardroom conversations around what to do, when to do it, how to do it, how to maximize efficiency and cost savings based on information we have from historical trends that are usually readily available to the company, but they just need someone who appreciates and embraces how to put it all together, synthesize it, and help to relay it in a way that's understandable for the business to make a decision from.
Sure, it definitely makes a lot of sense. So tell me then, so you talked about a few jobs here and there sprinkled in throughout your college ambitions, which is so impressive. So let's talk about the first job out of law school. So where did you start there? Yeah.
So I finished law school in 2012. At that point, the country, particularly in Florida, was in a foreclosure crisis. So my first job out of law school was working with a law firm that represented banks that were foreclosing on mortgages that were not paid by homeowners. So that was definitely a volume practice. So from a professional work perspective, I started to embrace the importance of being able to manage a lot of volume and data at the same time. I was handling a caseload of about 300 files. I was working primarily on Bank of America cases for this law firm. And I was traveling throughout the state, managing foreclosure proceedings for the banks. So that was a lot of cases, but what made it manageable was the fact that I embraced and appreciated how to synthesize similarities across different types of cases and how to build templates that could be reproduced in similar cases. So I wasn't necessarily having to reinvent the wheel on every single file that I was working on. So I think because I embraced the importance of identifying and synthesizing similar data, that really helped me to manage that many cases, being, coming fresh out of law school, first job. And then I did that for almost 2 years. And that's when I segued into the insurance industry. The next firm that I went to was one called Young Bilboes Palmer and Duke. They are an insurance defense firm, and I never turned back from the insurance space since then. I started there around about 2013, 14, something like that. And I started representing auto insurance carriers that were being sued for what we call in the industry bad faith lawsuits. So I was pretty much a trial lawyer there, federal court practice, handling all of these bad faith auto defense lawsuits for these companies. Not managing or doing a lot of data management at that point, but this was also the firm that I worked at when I picked up the MBA courses again and started working on finishing that MBA that I started in my first year of law school. So that job was more about me learning how to be a trial lawyer, how to try cases before a jury. Data management in the perspective of I had to study and understand a lot of case law and then synthesize similarities across them so I can argue positions and issues before courts. So I was more managing and organizing data to convince a court more so than to present something to the boardroom. But I really enjoyed that, and it really helped me to realize that I wanted to continue working in the insurance industry. So I left from that firm. I was there for almost 5 years. And then I went to another law firm called Kaufman Dolowitz, which was also an insurance defense firm, but they handled coverage. Well, they handle a lot of different types of lawsuits, but the department I worked with was handling insurance coverage work for carriers. So now, instead of just focusing on auto defense for insurance carriers, I was working on cases involving a lot of different types of insurance policies, like commercial liability policies, professional liability policies, and a lot of research, writing, and opinions being provided to carriers about what claims they should cover versus which ones to deny, how much they can expect to pay on claims. So I was doing a lot of just research and writing and coverage opinion works. And then from that position, I started at Universal, where I am now. And I've been at Universal since 2019. I came into my role at Universal as a senior manager. The company was at a point where the legal department was a little bit in its infancies relative to where it is today, for sure. It was at the point where it wanted to develop a team to handle the weather-related lawsuits. We call those our catastrophe lawsuits. We were coming off the cusp of, or starting, I guess, dealing with a lot of Hurricane Irma lawsuits. Hurricane Irma was that hurricane event that took place in 2017, September 2017. And usually it takes about a year or so before those lawsuits get through the claims adjustment pipeline and then end up in the litigation pipeline. So in 2019, we were starting to see a rise in the company started to see a rise in those Hurricane Irma lawsuits, and determined that it wanted to create a team in the legal department that exclusively handled those lawsuits. So that was the decision-making process that was going on that led to them needing to recruit someone to start those catastrophe teams. And I was the first manager that was hired. So I was hired as a senior managing associate general counsel with a small team of about 3 attorneys, including myself, a couple legal assistants and paralegals. And what happened after that has been very colorful and eventful, because almost a year later, COVID hit, and particularly with our company at the time was the largest private insurance carrier in the state of Florida. So a lot of the lawsuits that evolved out of the COVID crisis were involving our company as a defendant in those lawsuits. So volume started to tick up significantly. And most of these lawsuits were these Hurricane Irma lawsuits. So they were all coming into my group, and my small team of about 10 people started to become quickly inundated with double, triple, quadruple the number of lawsuits that we were accustomed to handling for the company. So that definitely triggered the challenge that I had to undertake to both staff the team, to hire more people to start handling the increased volume, and to start looking at the problem from the problem, meaning the volume of lawsuits, from the perspective of, okay, how can we be most efficient in handling these cases? Because these are all similar cases in terms of they're related to weather events. They're all almost all under the same insurance policy. A lot of the claims are similar. Therefore, a lot of the defenses of how we're going to handle it are similar. So again, similar to what I have always done from the time I started handling the foreclosure cases, I looked at, here's a lot of data and it can be overwhelming if I just look at the data individually. But if I start organizing and synthesizing it and start looking for trends, I can strategically handle it much better than taking each case on a one by one, case by case basis. So I really started to enjoy that part of the process. Like, okay, and I had to motivate my team around embracing that concept as well. So, I would be sitting with my attorneys one on one a lot and be like, okay, you have 100 cases, but these 30 all have, look at the date on these 30 cases. They're all under the same policy, or these 10 are all with the same law firm on the other side. So let's group them up, analyze them together. Maybe we can do some global resolutions there. I started just coming up with looking at various ways to look at the trends in the cases and figure out how we assign them or resolve them, and simultaneously work with the company on how we could get case management systems in place to not need to necessarily do all this analysis in Excel spreadsheets. But now the need started to grow for us to actually have like a sophisticated case management system, because now we were no longer at the point where we were handling, let's say, 1,000 cases. Now it was 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. At the height of this period, we were up to about 13,000 lawsuits at the height of when, we had our biggest volume. So it was kind of a two-pronged approach. One was dealing with the data that we had, using the resources that we had at the time to handle it, but simultaneously looking at investing in, technology solutions for case management systems that could allow us to more efficiently collect, analyze, synthesize the data that we had on all these cases we were handling. So that was what most of 2019 to 2021 looked like in my time at Universal. I was promoted to a deputy general counsel of operations after my initial senior manager role. And that it was during that deputy general counsels of operations phase that we implemented a lot of the more efficient technology solutions or improved case management system that was better suited for the volume we were working with at the time, and staffing the department appropriately based on, constantly analyzing how many cases do we have, how many hours does it take to complete these different tasks. Therefore, we need X number of people. So recruiting, and hiring and training was all a big part of that process between 2021 to 2023. And then my next move was to this general counsel of operations role that I sit in now, that both myself and one of the associates who I had the privilege of hiring during the time when we just started getting inundated with lawsuits right after COVID is now my counterpart, general counsel of operations. And so we both sit in this position where we are pretty much doing have parallel roles. I am now more overseeing what we call our daily or non-weather related lawsuits for the department. And he, Daniel Paterick is his name, he is over doing the parallel job handling now the weather or the catastrophe related lawsuits for the company. And together we are accomplishing this goal of constantly looking across our inventory and analyzing the data that arises out of all of these cases we're handling, so we can, handle the staffing aspect of the operations and the the projections and the analytics side of things to give recommendations to the company for forecasting purposes.
Visit dataversity.net and expand your knowledge with thousands of articles and blogs written by industry experts, plus free live and on-demand webinars covering the complete data management spectrum. While you're there, subscribe to the weekly newsletter so you'll never miss a beat.
Oh my gosh, that is just an amazing story of operational efficiency, using data to really create a way to manage the resources that you have.
Right.
Yeah, man, I'd love to see the ROI on that.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's now that we are getting into a little bit more of we have our arms better around things now, that the hard work we've put in over the last 5 or so years, we're seeing the effects of it. And it's, we're doing a lot of reflection now. And, I said to my counterpart, Daniel, and our chief legal officer, who is Daryl Lois, about a week ago, we were in a meeting and we said, remember when we had 13,000 cases and we didn't really have a great case management system? And how are we doing all of this in Excel? Now that we can now process and have quick information on our fingertips by just running a report in our system, it's, everything is so much easier, so much better. It's lighter. It's so eye-opening. It's actually exciting because we are looking at our entire inventory in one efficient spot, and we can quickly click 2 things and see what the projection looks like for the next quarter or the next week. And we can change parameters about, well, what if we parsed out just the cases under this type of policy? And maybe if we decided to resolve these, then what does the number look like there? And we can do all of that so quickly. All these hypotheticals, we're really having a lot of fun with the data right now, just letting our imagination run wild with all sorts of possibilities. And that's really because we embraced and invested and appreciated the importance of data collection and analysis for all the cases we're handling.
Oh. Wow, that's really amazing. So tell me then, what's been your biggest lesson so far in your career?
So I think it's, and when I think about, when you say my career, I think about pretty much everywhere that I've worked since the time that I started at a foreclosure firm straight out of law school. And I really think it's teamwork. It's one of our department's core values, mandated by our chief legal officer, Mr. Lois. And in every place that I've worked along my trajectory to get to my current role, none of it would be possible. I wouldn't be able to accomplish as much as I think I have without appreciating the value of how important it is to be collaborative, inclusive, creative, work well with others, respectfully disagree with sound reasoning where possible, but all to achieve a common goal. None of everything that I described that we've been through in the last 5.5 years since I've been at Universal would be possible without us really working together as a team. And that's not to misconstrue that teamwork means you must always agree. We oftentimes had different ways that we were looking at resolving issues, but we all always realize we have a common goal and we talk it out and usually come up with the right solution and outcome. So I think the biggest lesson so far in my career has been the importance of valuing teamwork.
It's an important one. Oh, I love it. So tell me then, especially having a master's in analytics, and what's your definition of data?
The simple definition of data in my mind is it's that raw information that you can collect for different reasons, various purposes. And the purpose depends. Sometimes the purpose is to analyze and process or just to make reference. And that raw data that is collected is sometimes, it's usually in two categories in my mind. It's usually textual data, that's in documents or filled into data fields in a database, or it's just numbers. And it can exist in various forms. It's sometimes it's structured and therefore easy to analyze and synthesize, and sometimes it's unstructured, which is much harder to work with. And trust me, I know, much harder to work with. And but ultimately, the goal is to figure out how and where this data exists and collect it in a way, usually and hopefully in a very efficient database system, so you can do an analysis to make an intelligent and informed decision.
Very nice. So then do you see the importance of data management and the number of jobs working with data increasing or decreasing over the next 10 years, and why?
I see it increasing. And hopefully I'm not saying that from a biased perspective, because I love data so much and embrace it so much, but I really see it increasing even in the advent of AI, which I don't think will replace the need for people to work with data, even though AI can synthesize data. I don't think it replaces the need for people to work with data, because at least in my practice area and space, regardless of how AI optimizes the efficiency of processing data, it always ultimately needs that human validation before it can or should be presented to, whether I'm presenting something for someone or preparing something for someone in the boardroom or to present to, let's say, a court. I think every industry has has benefit to gain from embracing data management. It undisputably is an excellent way to maximize efficiency, which maximizes profits and cost savings and minimizes waste. And I'm yet to work with or for any corporation that's not trying to ultimately accomplish that, right? So
Right.
as I even look back at the last 3 years since our department embraced and invested in better data management, we've been able to project our needs with much better accuracy and realize ways that we can create cost savings for the company that we just could not see and do as easily before. So I definitely see the importance of data management and the number of jobs working with data increasing, just, based on that. I don't think my industry in the insurance business is unique or nuanced in that perspective at all. The type of data I collect in my industry obviously is specific to that industry, but every industry has its nuanced data from that can be collected and analyzed to make better decisions for that industry and for that business that it would not otherwise easily be able to collect and analyze without the data. So
Yeah. Oh, I am with you on that. So then what advice would you give people looking to get into a career in data management?
I encourage it wholeheartedly. I think even for folks who do not end up working in as heavy of a data centered role as I do, if you look at the very basic and simple definition of data, I think we can all appreciate the benefit of the collection and analysis of information to make better decisions at its core basic level. So I definitely encourage folks to get into a career with data management, or to appreciate and embrace and learn even the basics of data management, regardless of what your role or position might be in an organization. It adds value to you as an individual in the organization. And I think that will help that person to also add value to the organization and set themselves apart ultimately.
I think you are a shining example of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, well, Michelle, it's been such a pleasure to chat with you and get to know you. If anybody wanted to learn more about Universal P&C, where would they go?
So Universal's website is it's uihholdings.com. Universal Insurance Holdings is the parent company for Universal. And from there, all our subsidiary companies, such as Universal Property and Casualty, is also identifiable. We have a lot of other subsidiary companies that are under the Universal Insurance Holdings umbrella. So that's our website. And anyone who's interested can learn a lot more about our organization from there.
I love it. Thank you so much. And we'll post that and information about you on the podcast page. Well, again, Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
I appreciate you having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what I do and what I love, and looking forward to meeting and talking again, hopefully in the future.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. And for all of our listeners out there, if you'd like to keep up to date in the latest in podcasts and in the latest in data management education, you may go to dataversity.net/subscribe. Until next time, stay curious, everyone. Thank you for listening to DATAVERSITY Talks, a podcast brought to you by DATAVERSITY. Subscribe to our newsletter for podcast updates and information about our free educational webinars at dataversity.net/subscribe.